Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesushappy.com. Before we get started, this is the trigger warning we do every show. If you're new here, we talk about horror culture and horror things which could involve sensitive subjects such as child abuse, rape, F-bombs, murder, of course. Well, not of course, sometimes. But, yeah, that's the trigger warning. So if that's not your cup of tea, go listen to something boring. Otherwise, welcome to the show. Coming up in the future, we're going to be interviewing actress and producers Julianne Prescott and Pollyanna McIntosh, as well as author Robert P. Atone. But today, we have with us Miss Paula D. Ashe, author of such works as We Are Here to Hurt Each Other and The Mother of All Monsters. I love those titles and covers. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate it. This is awesome.
Before we get into the meat of the interview, do you want to go ahead and tell us what you're currently working on?
Yeah, so I just had a story picked up for an anthology called This World Belongs to Us. It's from Beyond Press. The pre-order is available, and I think the book actually comes out in May. The subtitle is This World Belongs to Us, an anthology of horror stories about bugs.
Ooh.
There's some stuff from me. There's, let's see, who else is in this? Kellen Patrick Burke, Laurel Hightowers, Cynthia Paleo, V. Castro. The proofs are available now, but like I said, the pre-orders are also available currently, and the book comes out in May. My story is really messed up, which, though... Like, if you read my work, like, that's not a surprise, right? Like, that's probably to be expected. Yeah, that's part of the course. And then the next thing I'm working on is I'm going to have, I'm one of 3 featured writers for the Book of Queer Saints Volume 2. The Book of Queer Saints Volume 1 came out last year, I believe. And so we are currently doing the Kickstarter for Volume 2. Now, I wasn't in Volume 1. I was just a very happy recipient of that book. I was a very happy backer of the first volume. And then the second volume, because of the demand for the first one, Mae Murray is coming out with the second volume. And I was asked, along with Sam Richards and Allison Rumfitt, to be 3 of the featured writers. And so we're in the Kickstarter process right now. So yeah, that's some of the stuff I'm working on right now.
Cool. Yeah. Before I forget, also for listeners, if you are on Discord, please join us on Discord. There's a link to that on the Horror Makes Us Happy webpage. We also have joined Twitch, but that's kind of on hiatus for the moment for reasons I won't bother going into right now. Also, there's merch on the page. You can buy us coffee or become a Patreon supporter. Those are all links on the page. So in this interview, we ask sort of 3 sets of questions covering your childhood, teenage years, and adulthood to find out what it is about horror that you like, and then maybe ask some follow-up questions covering your entire life after that. But starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
So I was raised in a pretty religious household, and I remember very early on the thing that scared me to death was the Book of Revelation. We had a lot.
That's the good part.
Right. Except if you're like 4 and you think it's real. So you're 4 or 5. Yeah.
My memory of it is, it was really cool and metal because I was like 14 when I read it. But yeah, 4.
Sure.
Is,
yes. It's a little early for that. A little early for, the moon being red as blood and the night is black as sackcloth. Like the sun being as black as sackcloth. That's a little much for a kid. So I was raised among...
You're their target audience.
Yes, right. Which is true, though. So that's what makes it worse. So that was a big part of my childhood. Was the church I went to, I guess, would be... There was a lot of anxiety about... There was anxiety in the world just in general. Like, I grew up during the Satanic Panic, and that didn't, help. That was also a large part triggered by that. So there was a lot of paranoia and anxiety and acting out, I would say. I'm a big fan of metal, but at the time when I was a kid, we would do what do they call it? We would break records, we would step on them to get the demons out. That sounds insane because it is, but that is what that's the kind of church I went to. So there was a lot of fear of pop culture in a way, like a lot of anxiety about popular culture. And I know this is going to a way deeper place than probably intended. At the same time, though, to lighten it up a bit, I really loved stuff that was scary, even though the Book of Revelation scared the crap out of me. I remember seeing the trailer for the first Nightmare on Elm Street, and I was 5. I begged my mom to let me watch it, and so I begged and begged and begged, and finally she relented. But the compromise was I could watch it, but I had to cover my face with a blanket when there was a scary part.
Oh, she's thorough. Now just cover your eyes with your hands, because I know you'll peek through the fingers.
Exactly right. So I had to use a blanket. It was a very itchy, hot, scratchy blanket. I remember.
I know this blanket. I'm picturing this blanket in my mind right now.
Is it orange?
Did you get one that was knitted so you can see through the knit?
No. It's one of the thick wool ones.
Yes.
It's like,
yep. Yeah. There's no. Yep. I mean, it's. There's no peering through anything. It's just thick and it's hot and you can't see anything. And so I always saw, of course, Nightmare on Elm Street is not. It's a nightmarish film that's really scary. So I didn't see much of it, but the bits and pieces that I did see was enough that I had nightmares about Freddy Krueger for years. To this day, if I get really stressed out, like the way I can, like my barometer of how stressed out I am is if I'm particularly stressed out, I will still have anxiety nightmares about Freddy Krueger, even though I'm not actively scared of him. To this day, I'll be 42 at the beginning of May, so I'm not actively scared. Like I'm not scared of Freddy Krueger anymore because I just, like he's not real. Yeah. But that made such a
it's like it's become the avatar in your mind of fear and stress.
Yes, which I think in some ways is what he was intended to be.
Yes.
So
mission accomplished.
So right. Like well done. So those are the two big ones. The church and Freddy Krueger were the two.
That's a good pairing. So given your background, did you participate in Halloween?
Sometimes. So it was weird. I think so initially I recall being very young and I remember, you would get, because this was the 80s and you have those really cheap costumes with the plastic mask and the string that goes back behind your head. And I remember going to the fire station to make sure there was no razor blades and the candy and or whatever, like drugs. That was just the neighborhood I lived in.
The 80s were just simpler times,
It's in some ways, yes. And I remember like that was fun. I did trick-or-treating, but I think some things happened where we switched churches or something, and we got into that more like evangelical kind of vibe, and so Halloween became off limits, and so then I wasn't allowed to. So I didn't celebrate Halloween. I don't think I was allowed to celebrate. I didn't celebrate it at all, and I'm at the point now where like I never know what to dress up as for Halloween because I just don't have that association of like how like Halloween is a time to go out. Like usually what I do as an adult, I celebrate with my kid. My kid celebrates Halloween. We do trunk or treating and all kinds of stuff. We do trick or treat. We hand out candy. We do the whole nine. But like as an adult, for me, Halloween is something that I kind of see as a sacred holiday as a horror writer person. So that's more for me how I celebrate. Like I'll watch some scary movie, which I do all the time anyway, but like it's not really different than any other night, but
you watch more horror.
I watch more. I always have to watch Carpenter's, original Halloween, and
of course, as is tradition.
And that's usually the extent of it for me. So
was there ever a time in real life that you were actually terrified of something as a child?
Ooh, as a child. So there was a spot in my house that I thought was haunted as a kid when I was growing up. And it wasn't the house itself. It was just a spot in the house. There was a wall at the bottom of the stairs. I don't know what it was. I to this day, I have no idea why, but there was just this spot in the wall that, and I say haunted because that's the best approximation of what I can describe, but it was just like, there was something wrong with that spot in the wall. Now, I don't know if there's an overlap between this and watching The Twilight Zone and that episode where that little girl gets trapped in the walls. Like, I think that's like
Or maybe Freddy Krueger.
And Freddy Krueger, when he melts out the wall. Yeah, that's true. So I don't know if all those things overlapped and that's why, but there was a spot at the bottom of the stairs in this wall, and like I made it a point to always walk on the other side of the steps. So I would always walk on the right side of the steps. And never the left going down because that was too close to the wall. And then coming up the stairs, it was the reverse.
It's kind of funny. So one of the things that I've always enjoyed is mythology and history and stuff like that, as well as psychology. And one of my favorite authors is Joseph Campbell, who's done a lot of work on religions or mythologies all over the world. And you can break them up into different categories or groups based on the development of human culture. And before pre-agriculture, a lot of the religions in the world or mythologies valued certain places that made you feel special or good or bad. So there'd be like a certain grove in the forest that had this weird quality to it, or, the mountaintop that you were, get this view. And so there is the potential that there's something going on that we can't describe, but we all maybe feel like if we're, it's a similar thing to liminal spaces, I think. So there might've been some of that going on. I mean,
it's magnets.
Magnets are like, I don't know, like ley lines or something. I don't know. Yeah. I'm going to have to ask, because I was thinking about it while I was working on this for my newsletter. I'm going to have to ask my best friend, because she stayed at my house an awful lot growing up. And I can't remember if she avoided the wall because it was actually evil, or if I told her to, and I did the same thing and she was just mimicking me, because that's what you do when you're at somebody else's house. But I'm going to have to follow up with her and ask, because I'm very curious now.
Flipping that question around, was there ever a time in your childhood when you felt completely calm or safe or bliss?
Man, y'all are really hitting it hard here. Yeah, I mean, I felt a lot of peace on the front porch at my house, even though the neighborhood I grew up in we would not consider it safe by contemporary standards, but it was normal, So, yeah, I mean, I felt a lot of calm and peace when I was on the front porch, just hanging out with my family. I think I felt a lot of bliss while reading. I think, those moments when you're reading something and you feel the world open up to you in ways that had been closed before. I think those are some really what seem to be small but very formative moments that kind of carry you through more heinous stuff. I think that's for a lot of people who are readers. I think that's one of the reasons you come back to it, not just the intellectual curiosity, which is fantastic, obviously, but I also, at least for me, I know that's one of the things I cherish about reading, is that it gives me a place to experience a real peace that I don't often get elsewhere, I don't think.
Looking back on some of the media that you mentioned, was there a specific part of the Book of Revelations that you thought was particularly fascinating or scary?
It's all so, it's all so bizarre, and it's also it's incredibly visual. It's one of the imagery in that book is just so arresting and upsetting, which I get is the point, and it's also incredibly symbolic. And depending on who you talk to, it's all symbolism and et cetera, et cetera. But I think for me, the thing that it's also very sensory. So the thing for me is like the trumpet sounding that is always stuck in my head. And then I think there's an angel or something that has like the head of a lion and the head of a goat and the head of maybe a human or a man or something like that. I don't remember which angel, but there are several. And that kind of like monstrosity, but that's presented as like divinity, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, it's like the other classic angel depiction that's like several rings of eyes and they're on fire.
Yes. Yeah. That stuff to me now that stuff's really interesting. And I guess that's the thing that as a kid, it scared me, but I think my curiosity about it overcame the fear in some ways, because that's the imagery I play with constantly. I think is so fascinating.
It's interesting that you saw that stuff or read about it and thought about it being more curious and fascinating than fearful.
Yeah, like the stuff that scares me is the stuff that's about being judged, like the hell stuff. Like obviously, like that's what it's supposed to do. The stuff about like you're going to go to hell, you're a bad person, like that stuff is scary to me. But like angels with made out of wheels for eyes, and that stuff is interesting to me. Like it's scary, but it's more interesting than scary. But then the other stuff about like I remember there's several passages about like the seas boiling red, and the seas boiling, and there's like it like literally rains blood, and all like that stuff is scary, but the stuff about angels interesting, and that's how my brain kind of parsed that.
Well, what it made me think of is there's this quote, I forget who said it, but something along the lines of, when the angel of death approaches, he is terrifying, but when he arrives, he is like beautiful, or something like that. There's, and related to that, I believe in Hindu mythology, every god has two faces. There's the wrathful aspect and the beneficial aspect. And which one you see depends on whether or not you are ready for the gift that they're offering you. And so I wonder if there's some relation there of you weren't afraid, you're curious and fascinated because maybe there was some element of your personality that was open to the experience.
That sounds about right. I mean, that's the first thing they, when the angels show up, they say, "Be not afraid." Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not. But the stuff about, I'm like,
don't mind the piss running down my leg.
Right. I'm not. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. But that stuff, it's scary. It's terrifying, but it's also, I think anybody, it's neat. It's cool. It's interesting. Anybody who tires, and not to say that like, at like 4 and 5 years old, I was so tired of the mundane, but that's kind of the point of any, spiritual or ecstatic experience, we'll say, not necessarily religious, but any sort of, whether it's hallucinogenic, whether it's because of hallucinogens, or you're putting your body through the paces and experiencing some kind of transcendence. Like that's kind of that's the trade-off. That stuff has always been fascinating to me, even when I was a kid. I remember reading, I think in like middle school. It had to be middle school. We were reading like William Blake, and I just felt a very deep affinity with William Blake as a kid. And I think
like
it was
Red Dragon William Blake.
Yes.
Okay.
Because he also wrote extensively about the Book of Revelations and Christian prophecy and things like that. So I think it's just the idea of something being beyond the veil. I think that has always really intrigued me, even as a kid, even if I couldn't really articulate it. And I think because that was my first kind of exposure to anything beyond kind of the mundane, like my first exposure to the fantastic wasn't, I'm sure my mom read me like bedtime stories and fairy tales and stuff like that, but that wasn't the stuff that sparked my imagination. It was the Book of Revelations that got it for me, for better or for worse. And what that says about me as a person, I'm not sure, but I think we might figure it out today.
So moving into teenage years, other than this thing about William Blake, what? That's a good start.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be fun,
right? What other horror media do you remember from middle school or teenage years?
Boy. I think as far as like media and horror, I remember watching a lot of so I was a teenager in the 90s, and so this was the age of like The Crow, and I remember Dark City. I watched
Ooh, that was a good one.
I watched Dark City so many times.
The tuning.
Yeah, with that right, Mr. Plate. But that kind of thing. But I think for me, really, the big kind of turning point was that in the '90s, I discovered Poppy C. Bright, and I also discovered Clive Barker around that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, those are two really good sources.
Two really big sources. And that just kind of led me down the path of like Caitlin R. Kiernan and Kathy Koja, and I read a lot of Skip Inspector. I discovered splatterpunk and more like extreme horror. I think around that time is when I realized that I started to kind of come into my own as like a person who liked horror stuff, and not just horror, but I also wanted it to be transgressive. I discovered a lot of Cronenberg. At that time, I remember watching Dead Ringers a lot more than probably, I don't want to make any assumptions, probably any other 15-year-old girl. I don't know who's watching Dead Ringers all that often, but that was me. Yeah, I think that was a time where, for a lot of different reasons, teenagerhood, but also like becoming aware of my sexuality and really struggling with that because that was not
approved.
That was not encouraged. I didn't know anybody else who was gay or queer in any kind of capacity, really.
It had to be a lot more difficult dealing with that shit in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah,
yes.
It's very widely accepted now.
It's much more so. There's still problems for sure, but like in the 80s and 90s, I said, I didn't know anybody else who was queer, so finding people like Clive Barker and Poppy Z. Bright and Caitlin R. Kiernan was just such a relief in so many ways. So I think that was a big part of it for me in that part of like discovering my sexuality and just trying to not lose it. I think that kind of work was really helpful in that regard. And knowing what I know now, it makes a lot of sense. I also, even though this was more, I'm moving beyond high school, so we'll come back to it. But The Matrix was really, really important to me. But we'll come back to it because that's not exactly teenage years. So,
and I can probably take a guess where you're already going with that with the Wachowski sisters.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
It's funny that you mentioned Kathy Koja and John Skip because I don't know if you know this, but we've interviewed both of them.
I was looking at your list and I was like, holy shit, they interviewed Kathy Koja and John Skip. I literally said that because I was looking, I was like, who else there? I was like, oh damn, this is serious. I am in some pretty prestigious company here. So, hopefully I'm doing right by everybody. But yeah, I plan to go back and listen to those because
that's what I thought you might like.
They're good.
Yeah.
Especially John Skip.
And we've reached out to Poppy, and it's funny. I don't know if he's just turning his back on his past or we're just ignoring us because we don't have a large following yet. I don't know what's up with that, but I've tried to reach out to him 3 or 4 different ways. In the last of which was we're friends on Facebook. He did add me, and at one point I did reply to in a comment thread saying, I'm not trying to hijack your comments, but we've tried to reach out to you a couple times, and I don't want to be rude, but I just want to make sure that you're seeing the messages. And he didn't even reply to that. And at that point, you take the hint.
Yeah. Subconscious cues. Yeah.
And so at that point, we've interacted on Facebook. He posts different things, and I'll sometimes reply, and he's replied to my replies. There's interaction, but I don't know what's going on there. And I'm not asking you to answer a question, but it's just funny that we're trying, but I don't know what's up with that one. So we'll keep trying.
Yeah, bless your. And I don't mean this in the southern, way, but bless your heart. Seriously, I say that genuinely because I was right. I was raised by people from the South, and so, but they mean it genuinely, they're transplanted Southerners.
It's tone of voice.
It's all tone of voice. So I try to when I say it, I don't mean it in bless your heart. You know what I mean? I try to mean it genuinely because that would be rough. And I know for so many people, Poppy Z. Bright, his work is just foundational for so many people.
It's come up on a number of our calls. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially for for everybody, but particularly if you're a queer horror writer, finding stuff like Lost Souls and Drawing Blood. I remember the Love in Vain books. Like, oh my God, like that was just such a,
to be honest,
so
it's
important.
it's also equally possible that he's looked into what we're doing and doesn't want to, because not everybody wants to dig,
Sure, so, that's true. That's also true as well.
Or maybe he's okay with digging in his work, but doesn't want to do it in an interview.
But doesn't want to do it. Yeah, that could be it too. That could be it too. I think a lot of people, because I know when y'all reached out to me, like I kind of I enjoy this kind of digging, but at the same time, I'm not. It makes me a little nervous. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I'm like, oh, what are we talking about?
Like I like this, but not with me.
Not right. Yeah. So it's it's nerve. It's good, but I think particularly again, and I'm sure you have both experienced and recognized this, and have had people talk about it. It's horror does make us happy, but
it's a journey.
It's the why of why that is can be a little fraught, I think, sometimes. So
yeah, and I mean, part of what we do is we try to approach things in a healthy manner, and I think the healthy response to that is to acknowledge that there are difficulties in life, but the best you can do is do the best you can with them and try to make the best out of it that you can. And that in itself is a huge topic that could be a podcast of its own, but
for sure,
that is life.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to some of the other media that you mentioned. The first thing that you mentioned was The Crow. Particular scenes or themes about that spoke to you?
I'm a really hard sell for romance stuff. Like, it's just not interesting to me, but there's a couple of exceptions. I do care. I will be interested in romance if it's like, if it's queer in some way, that gets my attention. Or if it's somehow deranged and very sad. Like, that's the two. Like, if it's deranged and very sad, then I'm like, oh, wait, now I might be interested.
Tragic.
And The Crow, I think it was just, it was goth. It was very goth, and I just thought that was cool. I was not allowed to be goth, so I had a lot of, what's that called?
Fear of missing out?
The fear of missing out, but also, like, where you can't do something so you...
compensate?
Like, yeah, like that. Like a lot of compensation was through, like, watching The Crow, and then the soundtrack was amazing, and that was awesome.
I was going to mention that if you didn't. Anybody who has never heard the Crow soundtrack needs to go fucking check that shit out.
Like right now. Like yes. Do not delay. Like stop. Yeah, like if you listen to this,
are you serious?
I don't recall any of the tracks from. I know I've heard it. It's just I don't think I've watched The Crow since I was like
almost
16.
Every song on that soundtrack is a banger.
It blisters. Okay. It's one of the best soundtracks ever made, like hands down. Like
one of the better relationships of my life was defined by that CD and The Doors, the greatest hits.
Screw this podcast. I'm gonna just hop off and go listen to the Crow soundtrack right now.
So I'm saying, like, if you for somebody for like somebody who is listening, if you've never heard the Crow soundtrack, stop what you're doing. Like, pause this.
Particularly Golgotha Tenement Blues.
Yes. God.
There is just something smoldering about that track, and I've looked up the other stuff that guy's done.
It's okay.
Yeah,
but nothing
that particular
like
trac.
That was magic. That was that Golgotha Tenement Blues is just anyway. So we've had an experience. We've had an experience today. But that soundtrack, that movie, that tone, the tragedy of Brandon Lee, and I grew up. So this is also like kind of a weird aside. A lot of folks in the 80s were obsessed with martial arts. I was no exception. And I was really particularly obsessed with Bruce Lee because we watched a lot of Bruce Lee movies when I was growing up. And I grew up with a lot of cousins, a lot of, again, not to be like sexist, but I grew up with a lot of boy cousins. And so we would just basically fight each other all day. And as you do. And so all of that kind of blended into making it like a really perfect movie for me. And I think it also, I was a teenager, right? So that's like the kind of
angst.
The angst, right? Yes, the angst of it all, the lovelornness, it can't rain all the time, nobody understands, like that, all that shit. It was such a good movie to have as a teenager. Like I am grateful for that kind of,
And for those who haven't heard the soundtrack, It Can't Rain All the Time was a reference to the soundtrack, which is also an amazing song on that album. Go ahead.
It is by Gilles Sobule, who also wrote saying I kissed a girl. Different conversation, but anyway. But that was it was a very formative kind of thing.
You mentioned something I wanted to dig into a little bit about. So you weren't into romance unless queer or deranged slash sad.
Yeah.
What about the deranged slash sad part of it?
What did I like about that, or like what was?
Yeah, what spoke to you?
I'm deranged and sad.
Well, deranged and sad is just by default more interesting. There's more stuff.
There's more stuff. There is more stuff. There's more interesting stuff. No, I mean, I think for my teenage years, so I developed the symptoms of depression at the age of 13. It hit like one day I was fine, and the next day there was just a cloud, and it didn't lift for a good 10, 15 years. So I got some appropriate meds. So I think that was part of it too, was just trying to find art, find media that had that spoke that language, because one of the things that we talk, I mean, again, this is, it's 2023. We've come a long way as a culture when it comes to talking about like mental illness and the stigmas around mental illness, like, and particularly for like, myself as, as a Black person within like the Black community, like we don't talk about mental illness really, like that's not a thing. And so being raised in that environment, I know every time I do like these interviews, I feel like I'm talking about how terrible my family is. Like they weren't, but that was just kind of like a cultural value, and there was a reason for that. But because that wasn't something that we dealt with, there was nobody to really talk to about it. It was always like, okay, if you feel really sad, you should pray about it. And it's like, well, that doesn't help me at all. But thankfully, there were weird, sad, deranged movies that I could watch instead, and books to read. But yeah, it was an isolating time.
Going back to that topic, Dark City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Scenes about that one, themes.
It just, I really liked, this sounds weird to say, I really liked the way Dark City scared me. I liked, and this also for some reason just made me think of, this came a little bit later, but Lost Highway, but we'll go back to Lost Highway a little bit.
Kind of a similar vibe, yeah.
Yeah, but I liked, there's a scene where I think he's being tortured by I don't know what do you know what they're called? Like, because I know.
I do not.
Like,
I don't think they had a name for them.
The scientists or something like that, or I don't know, but I know they had like weird names like Mr. Plate, Mr. Hat, and Mr. Book.
Oh yeah.
But I just remember the scenes with them. I just appreciated their otherworldliness, and I appreciated that they knew what was going on better than the humans did, and I thought that was interesting. I don't know. I can't really articulate that one well because I haven't seen it in a really long time, but I remember it's one of my favorite movies, and I always just love the look of it. I know when I was, again skipping ahead, but I know when I was in college, it was a movie I would put on in the background a lot. Like I would study or do whatever, and it would be on in the background like constantly because I just really liked the way it looked.
I think it was a video on YouTube that was really interesting that basically pointed out that it was the Matrix before the Matrix.
Yes.
It kind of was.
Yes.
It kind of was.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And I think that's also something that I really appreciated as well. And I think that plays into a lot of like cosmic horror, like the idea that there's something wrong, but not everybody recognizes it, because that's
that feeling of like something is wrong,
but nobody else does, and nobody's gonna like the trope, there's something on the wing, like there's something you can see that's wrong but nobody else can, and they're not going to believe you even if you tell them, and then also what's the like, so you tell them and what changes? Nothing. Like there's nothing outside of like like at Dark City, you go to the end, you get to Shell Beach. It's literally the end of the world. There's nothing else out there. So why not just play along? Like what's the that stuff is really, really interesting to me. And I don't think that was something I consciously could have articulated at the time, but now certainly that's absolutely something that I think is really interesting and scary, but scary in a way that like I can handle it. I can look at that for a while. So
I don't remember Lost Highway. What was that one about?
weird stuff.
Some weird,
just weird
shit. Like it's just weird.
It was David Lynch, wasn't it?
Yes, David Lynch. Who?
Yeah, that explains it.
Was
right
this
there.
the one that like kind of ends with the house party?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. The thing I remember most about Lost Highways, although similar to The Crow, incredible soundtrack. That soundtrack is so great. The thing I remember about Lost Highway, don't ask me to explain the plot. I have no idea. I cannot explain the plot of any David Lynch joint. Like, I just don't have.
I think everyone struggles to, yeah.
Right.
and he himself doesn't even try to.
He doesn't know, and he doesn't care, which, so, like, I don't know. Like, that's why I don't stress about it. But the thing that creeped me out so hard was he's at a party with Bill Pullman and who's the girl? Patricia Arquette, maybe, in that movie? I don't remember. But there's a scene where he finds them at the party, and he says something to Bill Pullman's character, and he's like, I thought you were somewhere else. And he's like, I am. I'm there with you right now. And the guy, Bill Pullman, kind of looks at him, and it's like he's two places in one time, and it's a thing that should not be. And, like, that's the whole, like, part of the vibe of Lost Highway is about, like, aberrations of nature where there's stuff that people can do physically, and it's not supernatural, or I guess we would label it as supernatural, but it's like that's not a thing. You can't be two places at once. But no, this guy can. Right. Yeah, please.
You can't do that on television.
If I may,
please.
Glitch in the Matrix.
Yes. Boom. And we've come full circle.
Boy, we're just like uncovering every single source of the Matrix here today, aren't we?
Those Wachowski sisters, they were onto something for sure. But yeah, the glitch in the Matrix, like you're not supposed to be able to do this thing, but there it is happening, and that's what I really liked about Lost Highway. And I think also I don't know, like I said, David Lynch movies are very hit or miss for me. Like my favorite David Lynch movie is Dune, which is not a popular response. Yeah. But it is. No, I stand by it.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, thank you. So in some ways it reminds me of like The Matrix, The Crow, Dark City, Lost Highway are all kind of like spiritual siblings in a way. Yeah. I don't know. Like I don't have a whole lot to say about Lost Highway because honestly,
I don't know so much. I mean, like I see similar themes with The Matrix, but as far as like atmosphere, I would definitely say The Crow, Dark City, and Lost Highway have more of a similar atmosphere that I don't think The Matrix quite had.
They've got that charcoal mixed with seafoam.
Yes, color tone. We do love the grays and the greens in those films. There's a little bit more blue, I think, in
Lost Highway.
In Lost Highway, yeah, a bit more blue, but yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of other questions that we didn't get to yet in the teenage section. For example, you mentioned the Halloween stuff. I think. Did you say you started participating in teenage years or no?
Yes, I did. And that was really important because the town I grew up in had, I don't know if it's still around, it was the Neon Theater in Dayton, Ohio. And it was like an art house theater. And so they did these big Halloween celebrations every year. And so I remember one year, my best friend and I were like zombie killers, and we just, because again, this was very clearly like the late 90s, early 2000s, because we just had a bunch of knives on us, because this was not too long after 28 Days Later came out, I believe, and so I was really into Serena from that movie, or Selena rather, so I kind of dressed like as her, and my friend was like another zombie killer, and like we were just like walking the streets of Dayton just fully in like with various knives, and nobody said anything. Nobody stopped us.
Like, we're talking actual knives here,
right? I know, like real live, like actual. I collect knives, and so we had a fair amount of them.
Would you have stopped somebody who was walking around with real?
I wouldn't, but I'm not a police officer. I'm just saying.
I never thought about that.
To do this stuff, but
that's a good point. Like probably nobody stopped us because I had a bunch of knives. But this never occurred to me. Like that's why. So, but yeah, so
nobody's stopping us.
No, you're fine. So that was a big part of it, and that was fun. Like that was a fun kind of thing. And then they also did the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And that was very important because it's, obviously it's very queer and it attracted a lot of, queer people. And so that was one of the first times I think where I could be not out, but not in either. And that was really important. So
did you have any really scary dreams as a teen other than the Freddy Krueger?
Oh my. Okay. Sounds so stupid when I say it out loud. So I have, and I don't know where, aside from this dream, I had a dream once about a gigantic cloud-sized stingray in the sky. And in the dream, it was flying, I don't know, above me. And I was in the forest and I looked up and there was just this enormous shadow. And I look up and there's a fucking stingray with its stupid face. And it's just like, floating past me. And to this day, I'm trying to get over it because I have a kid and my kid really likes to pet the stingrays at the zoo, but I hate them so much. And it's because of that dream. I don't know where it came from.
How old were you when Steve Irwin died?
Oh, no, I was well into adulthood.
Do you remember what your emotions were in the dream?
It wasn't supposed to be there, clearly. That was the thing that really bothered me. Like, it wasn't supposed to be there. And I did not want it to see me. I did not want it to see me. I wasn't supposed to be wherever I was, or because it wasn't supposed to be there, I didn't want it to see me. I didn't know what was going to happen if it recognized me. And I have a lot of dreams. I had a lot of dreams like that growing up, which is pretty obvious why.
What do you mean?
It made me like being closeted, right? And to be clear, my family is supportive now, but like I didn't grow up in an environment that was supportive of my sexuality and wasn't supportive of me being, a lesbian. And so I think I had a lot of dreams about being found out, like dreams about being discovered, dreams about being, or nightmares about being discovered, nightmares about being like seen. Like that was a big source of anxiety. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Sort of almost similar to like a scorpion instead, but it's a stingray.
Yeah.
Stingrays are creepy though.
Well, they are. I don't like their faces. I know people think that, they look so friendly. They're smiling. I'm like, it's not though. Like that, they don't know what a smile is.
Like that.
That's right. I'm like, that's its face. Like you don't know what that expression means. I don't even think they have expressions. They're stingrays. Anyway, it's the whole thing.
Have you ever seen the stingrays that people dehydrate so that they look like monsters or goblins?
What? No. Oh God.
Do not Google that if you have a thing about stingrays. They're creepy as hell when they're dehydrated.
I'm going to, right? You know that, Chris. I'm going to.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because you said it, so now I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna wait till we're done recording, but I'm absolutely gonna look that up and be horrified. So
was there ever a time?
Sorry, and you're welcome.
Right?
Yeah, right. Was there ever a time in real life that you were terrified of something as a teen?
Oh, as a teenager, something I was terrified of. My big struggles as a teenager was the mental health stuff being discovered. It was the fear of me kind of knowing who I am and being okay with it, that struggle. I know I also, like a lot of teenagers, I just was very, like, I didn't know what I wanted to do with, like that pressure that we put on teenagers to like figure out your whole life. Mm-hmm. That I was really scared of. And I know I sublimated a lot of that fear, I think, by doing really well in school. And so that's one of the reasons why I've always been very oriented toward school and toward like academia, because it's always been a place for me to hide that was safe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I realize that now, but I think when I was a teenager, I didn't. It was just like, and it was also a way for me to get a lot of approval from my family. So that kind of helped balance what I knew to be the disapproval of other parts of my identity, I think. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Opposite of that, was there a time in your teens when you felt completely calm or safe or at bliss?
Yeah, the Neon Theater, the Rocky Horror Picture Show, books, movies, all that stuff. That was really integral to, I think, me being comfortable, like learning how to be comfortable with who I was, and just kind of, finding language for like who I was and how I felt. that I think those kinds of, and again, like I said before, like books, movies, I know I didn't mention this before, but like the People Under the Stairs is such a fantastic film for me in a lot of ways, because the area I grew up in was clearly not as bad as what is depicted in People Under the Stairs, but I really like that film because I think it reminded me a lot of in some ways of my childhood. So it wasn't as bleak as what's depicted there for sure, but
no crazy S&M couples with evil dogs.
I mean, that I'm aware of. We never know what's going on behind closed doors. But yeah, as far as I know, no. But just the idea of like the quote unquote inner city and like those kind of racial separation and segregation that's very much on class lines as well. Like that was so what I grew up in. And so I've always really appreciated that film, and I've always appreciated, was that Wes Craven? Yeah. For making that film that speaks to that experience, because you don't often see it represented in that way, and I thought that was really cool.
I actually haven't seen that movie, so enlighten me.
Oh, so People Under the Stairs is a 90s horror film starring Brandon Adams, I believe his name is, and it's about this young black boy who lives in the inner city, and his mom has some kind of cancer or something. She has some kind of illness. If she could afford health care, she would be fine, but she can't. So the kid's nickname is Fool because his sister does tarot cards and he always gets the Fool card. And so he has a family friend or his sister's boyfriend, like they rob houses and they go to rob this house in a nice neighborhood. And they get more than they bargained for trying to rob these people. And yeah, it's a really awesome like 90s horror film. It's really cool.
There are some people that are under the stairs that might have been there for a while. Some of them don't have tongues.
Yes. Some of them don't have other parts because those parts are bad. But anyway, yeah, I don't want to give too much away, but it's really awesome. You should check it out. Let me get a chance, Steve. It's real good.
Also, Ving Rhames.
Yes, Ving Rhames. That's right. That's right. I should have led with that. God, not only Ving Rhames in like a kente cloth hat, like that's just
right. Like,
oh man, that's good stuff.
Was this pre Pulp Fiction? Like, was that like one of his first bad guy roles?
Yes, that was pre Pulp Fiction. I think that might have been. I don't know, but I think that was what got him into Pulp Fiction. I think. Maybe.
You mentioned segregation. What was the angle there? Was it just that white people do weird shit? Like,
yes.
I think it was also the white people were like gentrifying the neighborhood and trying to move all the not white people out of it. That whole angle. Yeah,
they're super greedy. Like for the sake of them to just hoard it. Like they aren't doing anything with their money other than just like kind of being rich and just hoarding it, which is
they were doing something with it. That's what was under the stairs.
Yeah, that's right. Well, yes. Well, yeah, that's a whole. That's true. You're right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right. But yeah, it's good. It's a very smart movie. And
it is smarter than you think. Like, I didn't notice a lot of these undertones watching it as a kid or an adolescent, but like I watched it again recently as an adult, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of unspoken things in this movie.
There's a lot of stuff in that movie. There's a lot of, and it's really kind of, I don't know. I found it refreshing in the sense like it's transgressive is what I'm trying to say. Like it's a very because you wouldn't. I don't know. I like a movie that would critique that kind of thing now would be very over the top. I think like it would just be very.
Woke.
I can't think of just very like look at me, I'm making commentary. But People Under the Stairs is very.
No, I was gonna say that would be the reaction to it though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, people would call it woke and dismiss it. Yeah. But, I think People Under the Stairs, obviously because it's before that particular pejorative came into play.
Right. You brought up the word transgressive, which I'm glad you did because it reminded me I wanted to ask you about that. Earlier you had said you wanted horror to be transgressive.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Oh, there's a question. I think because it's easy for horror to repeat the same crap. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy. So, for example, so let's talk about slashers just for a minute as an example.
Okay.
My academic background is in feminist theory, sociology, and popular culture. And so, the initial reaction to the slasher is that it was depraved, it was excessive, it was misogynist, and just kind of base. But at the same time, the message within a lot of classic slashers is that the conventions of proper society have to be maintained, or else this monster is going to get you, right? And so slashers kind of serve to reiterate the status quo. This is not me picking on slashers. There are some that I like quite a lot. But I think as far as transgressive horror goes, I want something to break out of that mold. I just really like that a lot of horror seems to be dealing with the aftermath of this. Like, okay, so we had these slashers that told us if we stayed home and didn't have premarital sex and we did everything right, then our lives would be good. But it turns out not so much, for whatever reason. And so I like stuff that responds to that sense of dissatisfaction and disorientation.
To quote Picard, you can do everything right and still lose.
Yes, exactly. So I like that kind of horror. I also still like slashers. Don't get me wrong. So
yeah. You mentioned The Matrix. What else has jumped out to you as being important to you in your adult years?
I really liked anime, and I really loved Perfect Blue.
That was the first one that came to mind. We're talking about horror and you bring up anime.
Yeah,
so
that's yeah. And Perfect Blue,
it's on another level.
I'm sorry, I'm saying.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. It just kind of was everything that I wanted, and then some. I really loved Aronofsky's White Swan. I can't remember. Black Swan.
I still haven't seen that. I've seen like everything else Aronofsky, but not Black Swan.
That is definitely worth a watch. It's very similar to Perfect Blue, to the extent that people were saying like it was a quote unquote ripoff. I don't think that's true, but anyway, I really loved Perfect Blue, and I think it was very pivotal for me because I was watching it, I think, at a time where I was an adult in like I don't know, early mid 20s, and it's very much a movie. It's about a lot of different things, but one of the things that it's also about is the struggle to kind of own who you are and know who you are and not let other people tell you who you are. And I found that to be very resonant, even though it's also about, being a pop idol and being stalked by a fan, which is not my experience personally. But I think it does such a great job of telling a story about, again, kind of like, it kind of reminds me of that Picard thing, like you do everything right and you still lose, I found myself feeling very similarly. I did everything right. Like I did everything right as far as like school and things like that. And, I still struggled, which again, that's part of life, right? But I think for a lot of people in their young adulthood, I think for a lot of people, period, that's part of like just the struggle of being alive is like, okay, but I did everything I was supposed to do. I did everything everybody else told me I was supposed to do. And I'm still either, unhappy or I hate to put it like this, but like not in a relationship. At the time, I was very upset about that lack in my life. Or, I don't have any money or, whatever it is, like I did what I was supposed to do and I still don't have these optimal results. And I think that for me, Perfect Blue really spoke to me as a young adult trying to figure out like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? So yeah, I mean, and then also like the horror aspect of it was just that scene where she is just kind of out of it and sitting in her very small cramped apartment saying, "Excuse me, who are you?" over and over again. Like that just, oh God, like that's a part of so many people's early 20s, I think. It was just like trying to figure out like, what am I doing? Like what is even going on in the world? How do I fit in? Who am I supposed to be? Like, I don't know. It really hit all the right notes for me at the time.
So it's kind of interesting because at first I thought you were talking about Black Swan when you were talking about the struggle to own and know yourself. But I think you also did say that it was a similar theme also in Perfect Blue. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, going back to The Matrix, I'm not so much sure about the doing everything right and still losing, but definitely the struggling to know who you are comes up in The Matrix. Was that the thing, like the main point for you from the Matrix, or was there something else?
There's something I find very intriguing about the idea that the world isn't real, that we all live in a simulation. And like, I'm not wearing my tinfoil hat right now, but
but I mean, we are in a simulation. But yeah, no, I get it.
You know what I mean?
No tinfoil hat. None of us are crazy, but we are.
We are the simulation, you guys. But no, I think and I've always found that to be just a really interesting and terrifying idea. I remember I watched.
Yeah, exactly. When you first brought this up, I was going to say there are two schools of thought on this. People either find it interesting or terrifying.
Yes, yeah, I find it to be both at the same time. But I think with like the Matrix, it was cool because I don't know. It's, again, all the stuff that I like. It had, martial arts. There was a love story, but there's also like a bunch of people getting, shot and kicked in the face. And I just find that really interesting. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about a film that I think also one of the things that I like talking about all these movies. And there's a couple more movies I need to talk about. I don't have a whole lot of time, but I need to mention Hellraiser and Martyrs because that's anyway.
But those were influences in your adulthood?
Yes, very much so.
Okay. We will definitely expand on those in a second. Go ahead.
So I think with the Matrix, again, at the time period of my life, it was also kind of affirming in a way that the whole Thomas Anderson is Neo, like you get to define who you are. There are communities out there and people out there who think the same way you do, who see things the same way you do. I think, honestly, I know particularly for me in terms of like mental illness, like I was joking about this, but now I realize like one of the scenes in that movie that just really hit me really hard. Like I think I maybe cried in the theater was when he wakes up in the ship in the Nebuchadnezzar. And he says, and Neo says, "Why does my eyes hurt? Why do my eyes hurt?" And Morpheus says, "Because you've never used them before." And that always just really struck me. Like, what if all this stuff that I'm dealing with in terms of my mental health, what if it's not just because I'm damaged or I'm bad? Like, what if there really is something wrong with the world? And like, what if it's because I'm aware of, these various kinds of oppression and exploitation, and just like the world is a depressing place. Like, let's, what I mean? Like we can make some pretty solid philosophical arguments have been made toward that. There are several philosophical schools that is their foundation. So I think that was also kind of liberating in a way.
Oh yeah.
To have a movie say like, no, there is absolutely something wrong with this reality as we know it, because we keep doing the same shit over and over again and getting the same results. And
the architect was telling us, and we have to do it this way because we don't, you'll fuck it up even worse.
Yeah, right. We cannot accept paradise. Like that is the human condition right there. Like you could have it better, but you can't handle it. So this is what you get. Like I really like that. I really like that.
Yeah.
If I may quote Russ Cole from the first season of True Detective,
please do.
We all just need to walk off into oblivion, into the sunset together.
Right. Hand in hand, brothers and sisters. Yeah, for sure. That's another
Flat
one.
circle.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I love Rustin Cole so much. So
what you said there about the mental health pain being because the world is fucked up. It spoke to me a lot because so when I was a teenager, I had attempted suicide, and my family did get me a little bit of counseling, and it was only about maybe 6 months of counseling. At the end of the counseling session, what the therapist told me, you had a couple things to work out. We've worked through them. The bottom line of it is you're not that messed up. Your family's kind of fucked up, but they don't want to participate in therapy, and there's not much else I can do for you. And, you just have to wait until you're 18 and move out. And that was one of the first really liberating, experiences that I had in relation to that, because I was just like, holy shit, somebody outside the family sees what's going on. And you mean I'm not the one that's wrong? Like,
right. That's such a huge, I remember the first time I heard this was from the best therapist I've ever had. And she basically said the same thing. She's like, Paula, there's really like nothing wrong with you per se. Just the world is a really deeply unfair place, and you just happen to be one of those people who, unfortunately, can't stop noticing it. Yeah, like you can't stop noticing it, and you just keep getting shit on. Like it's not your. And that was I had the very, very similar experience. So thank the universe or whatever for therapists who can tell kids those things and help them feel better. Because up until that point, it never occurred to me because nobody ever told me that. Nobody just said, no, you're right. The world is fucked up, and you happen to have
bad luck.
Happen to be bad luck and be in these categories that are very far outside the status quo, and you'll be treated as such for however long. And that was really, again, like that was very liberating to hear that. I'm like, oh, and that took a lot of the weight off of, I think, a lot of the stuff I was going through at the time.
Yeah. So it doesn't change the work that needs to be done, but at least you feel like there is some weight lifted there of it. I'm not as fucked up as I thought I was. Right.
We're like, I may be fucked up. I'm not that fucked up. So yeah.
So Hellraiser and Martyrs, you wanted to talk about those?
Yeah, I felt like it would be disingenuous to me as a person if I didn't talk about the impact that Hellraiser has had on me, and Martyrs for that matter. The actual first Hellraiser movie I saw was Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. And the only reason why I watched it was because at the time I was really into Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and Terry Farrell, who played Jadzia Dax, was in Hellraiser 3.
Was she?
Oh my God, she was Joey.
She was Joey.
Holy shit.
She was.
There are so many people in Star Trek that were in horror movies. I mean, you've got the guy who played Kirsty's dad.
Yep. He was, what's his name? Odo.
No, he wasn't Odo. He was some Cardassian diplomat or something.
Yeah. No, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm not going to think of his name, but I know what you're talking about. But yeah, there's a lot of, there's a lot of horror people.
Thank you for that. Yeah. That totally just clicked to me. I did not know that Jadzia Dax was also in Hellraiser.
Yeah, awesome. She was in so that was the only reason why I had no interest in Hellraiser before.
You got Star Trek people up in this bitch?
There's that, but there's also, and speaking from my own personal experience, she was fucking hot. I mean, come on.
Yes. Oh my God.
Also, yes. Yes. Yeah, these are facts.
Facts.
In case she ever hears this, I'm sure you're still hot. I just haven't seen a picture lately.
At the time, like that's just still hot, but like at the time I was just like, wow.
You needed to see more.
I need to see more. And to be fair, that was one of the first same-sex kisses I ever saw on screen, was when Dax kissed, what was the... you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway. Mm-hmm. So I was like, let me watch Hellraiser 3 for reasons. And so I watched it. It was on Cinemax just to make it even better. Just, because we're, anyway. So we're all out here. And so I watched Hellraiser 3 and I was like, and it scared the crap out of me. It scared me so bad because it was there's this infamous scene. I don't know if any of you have seen Hellraiser 3, but there's this infamous scene at the beginning where basically there's just like a bloodbath in the club where there's just all these chains and hooks. Everybody's getting sliced into bits, and I'd never really seen anything at that level. Like that level of graphic at that time. And so I was like,
that's just jump straight in the deep end. Yeah. I mean, there's
so had you not, even though you hadn't seen the first Hellraiser, did you not have knowledge of it?
I had no idea what the hell Hellraiser was. I was completely like I had maybe seen, and it sounds goofy because I know, like I had been reading Clive Barker. I had been reading Clive Barker for a while at that time, but for whatever reason, it just never clicked in my head that hey, and I think maybe I hadn't read The Hellbound Heart yet. Because I think at that time I was still just reading and rereading the books of blood, because I was really into short fiction, short horror fiction in particular at the time. So I think I was just reading the books of blood. And so I didn't know that Hellbound Heart even existed. So I saw Hellraiser 3 first, and I was like, this is a lot to deal with. And it took years before I ever went back and was like, wait a minute. So that was Hellraiser 3. Mm-hmm. That means there's a 2 and I'm guessing a 1. Maybe I should go look at those. And then I saw Hellraiser, and that was it. That is my that's my all-time favorite movie.
Really?
It's my obsession. But yeah, so Hellraiser is just that's the thing for me.
Before I ask about the movie, I don't know if you noticed, but we've interviewed 3 of the 4 original Cenobites.
I think I caught that too. Because the thing about I'm just fangirling. I don't care. Y'all don't care. It's fine. The thing about Hellraiser is that not only Nicholas Berman Vince and
Simon Bamford.
And Marty Well. Oh my god. Yeah, I gotta go back and listen to that. So the thing I love about Hellraiser, the film, is that it wasn't just like, okay, this is Clive Barker's movie, right? Like, that's awesome. But like all the people in it at a variety of levels, from Pete Atkins to the actors to, Pete Atkins to the screenplay, like they are all like horror fans in their own right. And many of them are also horror writers. So I have all their books, and like Doug Bradley wrote a book about, behind the mask of the horror actor, and just, I don't know, like that's just, I just love it so much. So yeah, so I'll have to go back and listen to that for completist purposes, for sure.
Going back to Hellraiser, the movie, if you had to pick a particular scene or theme that speaks to you.
Oh, goodness. So I love everything about it, but I think for the purposes of our discussion, I really love Julia Cotton. I love her as a character. I don't know if I've ever seen a female villain who was played with such glee, and not in like not in a goofy way. Like, I don't know, like Claire Higgins just knocked it out of the park and then some. And originally she was meant to be the lead Cenobite. Like, she was meant to be the Black Pope of Hell.
Yeah, that's right. And they had a different actress for Claire, didn't they?
Well, they had a different actress for Grace Carby played the female Cenobite in the first one, and then the second one was Barbie Wilde. But Claire Higgins, after they did the first movie, they greenlit the second one, and after the second one, she was like, I will absolutely not do any of this again. I don't know the reasons why exactly. I've looked in different places, and I think it just wasn't her bag, like she just kind of stumbled into like being in these horror movies. But anyway, but I really love Julia Cotton, and I love, because I'm intrigued by the idea of people who do really reprehensible things for
love.
Yeah. But not even that, right? Because like, I think she knows that Frank doesn't love her, right? And I don't know if she loves Frank, but the working title for the first Hellraiser, apparently, according to legend, is What a Woman Wouldn't Do for a Good Fuck, or something like that. And so
I think I've heard that too. Yeah, that's legit.
Yeah, that's apparently legit. That is in the director's commentary, because I've watched it that many times I haven't memorized. But yeah, I think that's so cool and so interesting. I mean, as far as like themes go, in my own work, I do a lot of stuff about families with their secrets and people doing terrible things to their family members and stuff like that. And I just think that Hellraiser, at its heart, it's a family saga. It goes beyond that. Like, the farther you go into the franchise, it gets farther and farther away from that idea. But the first two, like, that's what it's all about. And I just think it's really, like I said, like, I like if I'm going to watch a story about a family drama or a family saga, then there should also be like some messed up stuff about sexuality and probably some monsters in it. You know what I mean? Like, I need those additional things to make it interesting for me, I think.
Okay. Let's see. So for adults, you mentioned Carpenter's Halloween is part of your tradition.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite costume that you like to wear as an adult?
So one year I dressed up as like a vampire slayer, and it was basically, I don't know if you ever watched like Buffy the Vampire. So if you ever watched the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there was a black slayer, not Kendra, that was in the 70s who fought Spike. I dressed like her, and that was by far the best Halloween costume I've ever had. Like, I was hot. Like, I just gotta be honest. Like, I was hot, and that was the best. That was the best Halloween costume, because it was one that I very intentionally put together. Because I think one of the, I don't know, like for some people, I always struggle with like who to be for Halloween because I don't know who I look like, if that makes any sense. Like I'm all like I don't know. So that was one of the few where I was like, okay.
So the next couple questions we're going to ask are going to be like overall life summary. The two questions we normally give at the same time are what's your favorite movie and what movie have you watched more times than any other, because they could either be the same answer or different answers. You've already mentioned Hellraiser being your favorite movie. What movie have you watched more times than any other?
Well, I've already mentioned that one. That is The Matrix.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've seen. So in addition to the art house theater in my city where I grew up, we had one of those second run dollar theaters in the town where I grew up, and The Matrix was there. So, The Matrix played in forever, right? So
all right. So it's not like even watching it over and over at home.
No,
you got to watch it in theaters
in
multiple
theater.
times.
I saw it in the theater 22 times.
Holy shit.
Because my friend and I would get bored. My best friend and I would get bored.
They kept that movie in that theater just for you.
So I think maybe we single-handedly kept it there for months, maybe even a year, because we would literally like get bored. Like we would be bored and be like, what do you want to do? I don't know. You want to go see The Matrix? Okay. And like I remember because we were also, we were teenagers.
Going to do for $1?
Yeah, we were like super poor, so we would get like change out of like the cup holder in her car and like go see. And it was like, it was like 2 hours and 40 minutes. So yeah, you can't beat that. But yeah, I've seen The Matrix about 21, 22 times because it was at the dollar theater.
Every time you see it. Sorry.
It was. And it was. And this, oh my God, and like, so I used to smoke, and like, you used to be able to smoke in the theater, and oh God, it was great. It was great.
So before we ask the next couple questions, let me give you a summary of the things that I've kind of made notes on that seem to be coming up multiple times.
Okay.
So there's kind of two things. One didn't really come up very much, and I am kind of surprised by it because I thought we might go back to that, but one of the first things that I had written down was about being opened to new experiences and ecstasy and seeing beyond the veil. That didn't really seem to come up as much. So maybe that's like a minor, like if you got a major and a minor, maybe that's the minor. The thing that came up a lot more often was, about being hidden, which we talked about, probably being related to being closeted for a while, then doing everything right and still losing that, the mental health pain being because the world is fucked up, not because we are, and how affirming that was. But then there are other things that related to affirmation as well. Things about, families with secrets. You even mentioned on the thing about Halloween, how you often don't dress up with it as anybody because you don't know who you look like, So there's lots of little things that I guess that you could tie in having to do with affirmation or representation. So as a summary for things that are important to you related to horror, do those things seem accurate, or do you think there's something else that's more accurate that we've missed?
I think that's a pretty accurate summary. I think if I had spent some time, I don't necessarily think we have time to do that now, but Martyrs is really important for me because its relationship to pain. That's something I really am interested in, both in my work and then in the stuff that I read and the stuff that I write, or the stuff that I read and the stuff that I watch as well. I think the stuff about affirmations and the mental health and pain and the world being fucked up and all that that's true. I think that's fair. That's a fair summary, I think, of the stuff that makes me happy in horror. But I also, I guess this comes back to the demented sad piece. I think one of the things that also makes me happy is I really appreciate, I think this is one of the reasons why I like Hereditary, since we were talking about Aster. I really like movies or books or anything in horror. I like that horror deals with pain and in a philosophical kind of way. I think that's really interesting. I think that's also very transgressive because in our culture, particularly when it comes to like bodily pain, like we just want to fix it and move on, and like, but at the same time not, like, it's the whole thing. So So yeah, I think that would be the only thing that I would kind of add. Like, I like that horror says something about the nature of pain, and at some points and I think kind of this is with Hellraiser, the necessity of pain to sort of either transcend or transgress beyond, like, again, the mundane, or what's the day-to-day stuff, or the fucked up world. Like, you can get through it through.
Oh, wait, I got something for this. It's in my horror comic. Where did it go? It's one of the tenets of the God Malal that I made up.
While you're looking for that, I would say that I think that kind of falls under what I was saying about, the mental health pain and about the world really being fucked up. But I like what you say about, it being transgressive to actually address that, because, as you say, that's not something the mainstream world does very well.
Yeah.
The normal follow-up question would be, do you have any idea why it is that you like those things? I think that's pretty self-evident from the conversation that we've had. The next question would be, why horror? Because couldn't you address some of these topics in other genres?
I think you could address these things in other genres, but I think eventually it's going to be sci-fi and horror, or it's going to be black comedy, or it's going, you know what I mean? Like, there's something about it that's going to be horrific anyway, because that's just the nature of how we categorize pain and thinking about it, is that it becomes horror already. Are there other ways to do that? Probably. But I think, at least in the registers that I work in, like, it's interesting that you say this, because I'm thinking now about how, like, sometimes in my own work, I'm like, is this horror? Because it's not, it's not supernatural, and that's the most obvious kind of thing that is equated with horror is supernatural. I don't really deal with supernatural stuff too much, at least not in We're Here to Hurt Each Other. So sometimes I have these moments where I'm just like, is that actually what I'm doing? But I'm like, if I had to choose anything else, like, I would still choose horror. Like, that would always be, like, my choice, no matter what I ended up writing, because I think it's expansive enough to include that. But I think, yeah, I mean, I know that there are people who write about pain and the experience of pain and the value.
Let me ask a related question. So, is it maybe the kind of pain that you want to focus on? Because, for example, rom-coms have certain kinds of emotional pain.
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I think that is it. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good way to clarify. Yeah, it's a type. It's like, again, rom-com, like, I don't care about people who are sad because I shouldn't say I don't care. That sounds terrible. I sound like an asshole. I mean, I do care. I've been through that kind of pain. You do what you can to avoid that kind of pain, if you can, in a healthy way, I think. But I think it's
not that you're being insensitive to this kind of pain. It's more that you want to try to focus on this other thing.
On this other kind of pain.
And that's what I'm asking is, so what's the focus on that other pain?
I think the pain that just, again, I can't escape Hellraiser. I feel like it's the pain that kind of opens doors. Like, it's the pain that offers you insight into something else. And again, not to say that the pain of a breakup can't do that. For some people, it can, in a really bad, destructive, way. But in particular, I'm really interested in the pain that people inflict on themselves, like, for whatever reason, whether it's because of a breakup or what have you. But I think that is still connected to another person. And I think what I'm interested in is, like, people who either are doing it for solely selfish purposes, or if they're doing it, like, well, I guess if we're talking like Hellraiser, like, it's kind of like appeasement to a larger,
ritualistically, almost?
Like ritualistically, kind of
to appease like a greater. Okay, yeah, especially now that you bring that up. Have you ever heard of the American Guinea Pig series?
No. Is it supposed to be like a snuff film or something?
The original one was, and the American original one, it kind of goes along the same vibe. It's Unearthed Films is doing American reboots of the Guinea Pig films, which, yes, were Japanese snuffish films, to the point where Charlie Sheen thought it was real, and he called the FBI. That's right. Yeah, it was that one. But the fourth installment in the series, American Guinea Pig Sacrifice, is basically about, it's like an hour and a half of a guy torturing himself in a bathroom. So if you like people hurting themselves, suffice it to say, screwdrivers go places they shouldn't go.
You know what's the thing about me?
That was a one and done.
Right? I will try it. I'll try it, but I'm such a
putting screwdrivers places they shouldn't be.
Not that.
Watching the film.
Yes, watching that film. Thank you for clarifying.
Not judging.
I might try that.
Now you think about it, maybe no, but I'm such a like a wuss with some stuff. Like there's some stuff that like Salo. I can watch Salo. I haven't watched it over and over again, but I've watched it several times. But then like a Serbian film, nope, absolutely will not. I will not watch that movie. So I'm gonna try. It's 4. It's American Guinea Pig.
Yeah, it's called Sacrifice.
Okay.
It's along the lines of what we were talking about. It's like, it's probably like the less torture porn of, not to liken it to torture porn if Stephen Bureau ever listens to this one. It's the less graphically offensive of all of that. No, it's still pretty harsh.
I mean, the screwdriver thing seems pretty. I don't know how that wouldn't be offensive.
Yeah. But it goes along the line with what we were talking about, like people inflicting pain upon themselves for a higher power, because that's without giving too many spoilers away, that's kind of what it's about.
It just makes me think of this makes me think of like Tetsuo and like
similar to Iron Man. Yeah.
I like what's
that
different Iron Man. Yeah.
I like what you said about pain opening doors, because you don't need to learn anything if you're not in pain.
Right.
Which, of course, is part of the reason why there's a lot of people who maintain their ignorance, because if you're
ignorance is bliss.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're enjoying it, what incentive do you have to show it to change? I mean,
right, and it hurts to learn. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it hurts to to challenge yourself. Like that is like people talk about cognitive dissonance. Like that is for some people that is actually painful. You know what I mean? Like so. The challenging of oneself, the challenging of one's kind of values, like, transgressive, challenging the status quo, like for a lot of people, that is if not a pain, then certainly a discomfort that they're not willing to engage in. And I think.
So let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Is therapy self-inflicted pain?
Sometimes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a loaded question.
I think if you do it right, I think it is. Yeah. I think sometimes it is. I mean, I think. Like I'll just say, I've had therapists who have not challenged me, who have not made me, hurt in that certain way, and I felt like it was a waste of my time. Like
get my money back.
Like
you're not hurting me enough.
You're not hurting me enough, which probably, again, says a lot about me as a person, which I understand that's the point. But no, I mean, I feel like it's to an extent. You have to get through that pain, right? Like you have to, like you were talking earlier about like the purpose like of this show and like horror makes us happy and looking at like the stuff that's uncomfortable.
Now we come back to Beyond the Veil.
Yeah. So you have to push through some of that stuff to get to whether it's acceptance or apotheosis, like you got to go through some stuff and it's going to hurt. But if you can make it through that pain, that discomfort, there is something worthwhile on the other side. And so, yeah, I think you're right. That is the thing that's beyond the veil. So,
or the pain on the way to.
Yeah. Like you're going to have, I mean, it's a sacrifice means to, coming back to American Guinea Pig, a sacrifice means to make sacred. How do you make something sacred? Through pain.
Never made that connection with the word. You're right.
Yeah. It's through pain. So.
I just quickly Googled something because I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing it right, but now I'm actually kind of upset because the result that I got is not what I thought what I was expecting.
Did you sell your search history?
No. Well, what I was going to give her is, she mentioned apotheosis. I was going to give her an antidromia, which my previous understanding of that word was that it's... Are you familiar with the song 46 and 2 by Tool?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the song is about coming to the shadow, trying to come out on the other side. Mm-hmm. My understanding was that in Antidromia was being on the other side, which apotheosis is kind of similar to what's in 46 and 2. So I was going to give that word. However, now that I'm reading some more about that word, it looks like maybe that's only part of the description. Maybe there's more to it, but leave that as the exercise to the listener. Your research that word.
That is your
homework. How can you say it for me again? How do you spell it?
Enantiodromia?
Enantiodromia.
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 Can I hear it in a sentence?
Fuck off. It's not a fucking spelling bee. All right, so last question. Is there anything you've thought of that might be relevant that hasn't come up on the call? Maybe something you thought of earlier that we bypassed?
Not really. I'm fascinated. First of all, I just appreciate the fact that I can have a conversation with people and be like, have you heard of 46 and 2 by Tool? And I'm like, yes. Like, you know what I mean? We just talked about The Crow for an hour. Like, yes, of course I have. So yeah. That's just
that song got me through probably one of the hardest times of my life.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, on the topic of, finding or being in pain and working through it and coming out on the other side. That
so much of their catalog, particularly their early catalog, has gotten me through a lot of stuff. 46 and 2 was a big one. The whole Lateralis album was just The Patient. That was, So, yeah, that's a whole different conversation about like music and all that.
Oh, yeah.
So, for sure. But
the Tool podcast.
There we go. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you joining us today. It's been a great call.
It's been fun. Been a good one.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. And thank you to anybody out there listening. Again, please do come visit us at horrormakesushappy.com. We're still in growth mode, so the best thing you can do to help us, other than being a Patreon supporter or something like that, is just tell a friend.